All right, so this is the beginning of the mobile form fusion project. And some of the materials I have right now is 3 different sizes of this red graph ruler. Very effective for this project. I do have this T-square only because I don't have a long metal ruler. When I use a T-square for vanishing point purposes, I'll turn the T-square upside down. That way it's not angled from the thickness of the other side of the T-square. So I also have a bigger one just in case I need to hit a vanishing point. This is probably for later on once I get more developed into the project. For now, these little guys are going to work. I probably don't even need this big one here. Didn't get something in the mail. This is for cutting fabric, but I haven't found a use for that one yet. It's a little bigger than I thought it was. So the objective here is to draw this using 2-point perspective. So this is just a printout of a stapler that I found on a Google search. And what I'm going to do is draw on top of it where the rectangle exists. So I'm going to do it with this pencil because I think you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is just find the corner that's closest to me, which is right here. And I'm going to make a perfect vertical line. I'm just going to use the edge of the paper. And that represents the corner closest to me. The second line I'm going to put in exists right here. It might be hard to see this because it's black and you don't really see the plane shifts within the form, but right at this corner here you can kind of see. And then there's an angle there, right? And then right here at the very bottom, I'm gonna do the same thing. There's an angle here. Now, these 2 lines, I don't know if in the video this is distorted or not, but these 2 lines eventually will converge to a vanishing point way out there. The next line I'm going to put in is right on the top of this, but I don't want to go on an angle because this does go towards an angle. So what I'm going to do is this line here, I think I'll start off with that one. That is on the ground plane, and the ground plane is definitely even or flat. So I'm going to put a line here, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is, if I were to have my horizon line established, which is way up here, because I'm looking on top of this form, that means the eye level / horizon line is above the form. It's either up here, it could be up there, I'm not exactly sure yet. But instead of making a line like this, that's going to converge too quickly. I'm going to make a line probably like from this corner out like that. And then this corner out, probably something along the lines of that, okay? Next thing I'm gonna do is at the end of this, draw a line straight up. Just using the edge of the paper and putting the ruler parallel to it to make sure that my line is somewhat vertical. And this line here, even though I can't establish where my vanishing point is because this is so big and the vanishing point is gonna be way out there, I'm going to guesstimate it. And just remember that parallel lines converge to the same vanishing point. So this line and this line would be parallel. So what I'd usually do at this point is I'm just gonna angle the line to it. And you can see with the graph ruler, it's one of the reasons I like to use this, is you can see that it's angling towards it. So I'm just gonna put a line right here. That may be right, it may be not, but it's close, it's in the vicinity. And then I'm gonna put a line on the exterior right here. And then I'm going to put a line on the exterior here. But before I do that, I just noticed something as I drew a cube around this form. I noticed that the base of the stapler is wider than the top because when I drew a line up, I just noticed this gap between there. So what I would probably do is extend this out just a hair, this side, so I can make small little adjustments. And then this line here is not going to go there. I'm actually going to move it out a little further than where I had it, about right here. That's a little more accurate. And this line here is probably gonna be like right here. So this one adjusted a little bit, not a big deal. So that's the rectangle that exists. So I'm gonna try to draw that same rectangle here. However, it's gonna be a little distorted because I'm gonna have my vanishing points closer. And it might turn the angle of the rectangle a little bit. Not a big deal. You're using this as a guide, as a resource, not as the only, not to copy it word for word. The reason you draw a rectangle around it is just so you can kind of break it down and understand it and see how it exists in space. All right, so what I'm gonna do is, since I know my eye level is up top, I'm gonna draw a line. I'm gonna move this over so you can kind of see what I'm doing first. I'm gonna draw a line right up top here. Okay, I'm gonna put a vanishing point here. Actually, I'll put a vanishing point maybe here, a little bit in from the right, and then I'm gonna put a vanishing point right on the edge here. Then somewhere in the middle, I'm just going to put that line. I think I'm gonna put the line like right here. So this is gonna be the first line I drew in. This represents this line right here. I think it's, at this point, you can just kind of guess. I'm just gonna lower this a little bit. You can guess and say, let's just make the stapler about this big. And again, this is gonna change. It's not gonna look like exactly like that rectangle, but it's gonna be a rectangle. So then, after I made the height of this the way I want it to, then I'm going to connect this vanishing point, this point with that vanishing point. I always make two dots here just so it's easier for me to connect these 2 points. I'm gonna do this real quickly, and I'm also gonna do this to the other side. As you can see, it's much different so far. And then after that, what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna guesstimate to be, I could even rough this in and just kind of lightly draw a line like this and say, maybe the stapler kind of lives in this dimension. I think that feels about in proportion to what I see here. So since I roughed that in, now I'm going to put it in with my ruler. And I do recommend it. Just rough things in before you put it in with your ruler, because once you use your ruler, you're kind of committed to that line and you're more resistant to erase and go back. So always just rough something in and say, that's about right. I'll go with that. In addition to that, I do want you to draw this as if it's transparent. It's going to get a little confusing with your lines, but just make sure there's a light line there, and then this back corner should just be a line straight down. Now, since a lot of you drew with parallel line construction before, or isometric, however you want to call it, so you can kind of see where all those lines meet. It's basically the same thing, with the exception that what was once parallel lines now converge to a vanishing point. And in this case, there's only 2 vanishing points. The vertical lines remain vertical. They are parallel to one another. That's the only difference. In 3-point perspective, those vertical lines would go to a vanishing point as well. But we're not doing that with this project. It's not important. All right, so I'm just gonna lighten up some of the lines that I created just so I don't confuse you, the viewer. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this back here. And I'm trying to figure out this form. So there's a couple like big shifts, like plane shifts or divisions of form that's important here. So for example, this base is basically represents the rectangle on the bottom. How big is this base? To me, it looks about that big. So what I'm gonna do here is this, I'm gonna guesstimate and be like, it looks about that big. So if you see that little point that I made, I'm gonna take my vanishing point, connect it to that point I made, and just run a line all the way through. Run a line all the way through. And you don't have to at this point, but you can run the transparent line as it goes around the form. Eventually you will, but for now I'm just kind of lightly putting it in, because there's gonna be a lot of lines that will get confusing. Don't worry about the rounds yet, that comes later because it rounds here, it rounds here. There's a bigger base at the bottom and a smaller base up top. I'll show you how to achieve that. I could have even started with a smaller base up top or on the bottom and then build up top. Maybe I'll do that and just adjust the size of things. The next thing I'm gonna do is, I noticed that this square is smaller than this here. So how do I make it smaller but still in proportion? So when in doubt, cross your corners. On this front plane here, I'm crossing my corners, find my center. I'm gonna take my center line, draw it vertically up. Hits here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go out from center as even as I can on both sides. But in this case, I think I wanna go on this diagonal line, you're gonna go, I take that back. On those diagonal lines that you made, you're gonna go in a little bit. So I'm gonna go in about this deep in. And then I'm gonna take it to the other side using the left vanishing point here. Okay? So I have my width that I want, and it's even on both sides, right? I'm fine with that, but I'm gonna extend the height back up to its original height because I believe the original height exists here. So I'm trying to be as true as I can to this form, but at least I was able to shrink the width in evenly on both sides. Just trying to make sure that my lines are straight. And this little tool is super handy because you're gonna do a lot of erasing. And if you're to use something like this, you're just gonna erase most of your work and then have to redraw. You'll take 1 step forward, 2 step back. So I'm gonna extend this up. And then if you look here, it ends about right there. You could just kind of say, let me just measure this real fast with my pencil. 1, 2, it counts about 3 times down. So that will be like 1/3 of the space down. So what I can do is just try to like look at what 1/3 would be. Looks to be about maybe right here. And then you can just count and you can see I'm using my pencil and my finger and I'm just like counting, marking, counting. That's about 1/3. I'm fine with this. If it's a little off, it's not a big deal. So then I take that point I made, I connect it to the left vanishing point, and I run it across. So far, I have this plane done. You can kind of see right around here, the design of this stapler has like a little hump here, and then it goes down and then back again. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna run a line all the way down, and then I'll add this after the fact instead of trying to do this and then down. I think it's too confusing. I think this is an easier line to make. So I'm gonna run a line all the way down. And then I'm also looking at this here and I'm thinking about like, if I were to extend this line all the way past here, which I do, where does it intersect this vertical line here? Is it about halfway down or is it a little bit above halfway? To me, it looks like it's a little bit above halfway. So I'm going from here to here, that would be halfway. So I would say it's safe to say that dot right there. It's a little bit above the halfway mark. And I'm just making a visual assessment of what is half and what is not. So now I'm gonna put this line in, right? This represents this entire big line there. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run that across. So if you take this right side here, run it across to the other side, but you have to use the vanishing point. And it runs across to the other side here. I'm gonna put a little dot, and then I'm gonna connect that to this point here. And you can kind of see that the ruler is starting to taper down. Stapler. And then I can add this little part here, which is about right here, or runs across to about right here. So if I'm looking from here to here, I'd say this will be halfway between here and here. So maybe it's like 1/4 of the way down. I can just eye that. I don't really have to do some crazy measuring. If I wanted to, I could half this plane in half, find the center point, half it again, find the center point. But I'm just gonna say, you know what? That seems to be about 1/4 of the way down. I just did a quick visual assessment. It's not a big deal if it's slightly off. So then I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna run it to the other side. Okay? So instead of going down and and subtracting, I'm gonna add up because you can kind of see there's a little bit of a lip there. So I'm just gonna go up just a little bit, not to the top of the line, just maybe just between there. And then I'm gonna run that line over here. This is so small that it's probably hard to see. Run it over there. It intersects this line right there, and I'm gonna, oops, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can see this, but do you see this point right here? I'm gonna draw a line straight up where it meets this line, intersects it there. I'm gonna run a line over to this point here. So you can kind of see that it went up, down, and over. If I had a better rectangle, I could kind of see what I'm doing. The lines are getting really congested there and tight, so it's probably hard for you to see what I'm doing there, but give it a whirl and see what happens. The next thing I'm gonna put in is this line that goes straight down. Now there's a variation of line there, and I see that, but I'm just gonna make a line straight down, and then I'll put the variation in after the fact. You can always change things. So what I'm doing here is about right, since this line represents that, and you have to go all the way down. And also, if you see the negative space here that exists right here, that is because this ruler starts to taper and get smaller at the rear end of it. I'm going to play around with that in a second, but the first thing I'm gonna do is I think I'm just gonna put this line in. So if this line goes about right there, and it's nice to use this just to draw it out, and it's a little bit above this, so I'm going to put a point right here. I think that point is safe, and then I'm gonna connect it to this guy here. Oh wait, I'm sorry. That doesn't mean anything. All I have to do is take this and I run it down, and then it dictates where that line is. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Actually, I lied because it's not parallel. It's good I did that because this line is not parallel to this line. It actually tapers down. So my first attempt was actually right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna connect it to this guy. Okay, so you can kind of see the stapler starting to form a little bit. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to make this back part a little bit smaller in the rear. And so some of these lines might change a little bit. And I'm just gonna make it a little smaller. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cross my corners, find my center. Again, I'm just gonna go down a diagonal line about right here. And I'm gonna run that to the other side, but I have to use my left vanishing point just to see where it exists and hit the diagonal line here. And I'm gonna drop vertical lines down. Now, those vertical lines down that I dropped where it intersects this back line right here, I put a dot, and where it intersects this back line here, I put a dot. And now I'm gonna reconnect these two lines to those 2 points. Before I do that, I'm going to erase these lines I put in. And you might find like, why'd you do all that work in the beginning? That's okay, I can redo it. This is just part of the process. You do one thing and it changes. So I'm gonna take that point here, turn it there. Now that I'm doing that, I'm probably gonna wait till the very end until I put all those little subtle variations in. And then I draw a line down to here. So you can kind of see how this black part's tapering down and it gets smaller in the back. It's starting to kind of form now. The next thing I think is important is this little guy right here. And it feels like this line is parallel to this line. So that means it's gonna go to the vanishing point up here that exists already. So it's just a little smaller. So again, the diagonal lines that I made previously right here, I'm going to go in about Again, I'm guesstimating about right here. And I'm going to take that where it intersects that the mark I put, where it intersects that diagonal line, I'm going to take it to the left vanishing point, or run it over to the right, put a little dot, and that way I can drop two vertical lines. And remember, the vertical lines do not recede to a vanishing point, so you just drop a vertical line. And you can see how effective it is using one of these rulers, because you can see through it and you can make lines parallel just by lining things up. So I have my little doohickey here, whatever the stapler part, and there seems to be a little gap between here and the bottom portion. So what I'm going to do is just put a mark here and just say, that's about the gap that I want. I'm just making the gap up, and then put a line in. So that's the little section. And again, this is super small compared to this guy. So it is nice working a little bigger. You can kind of see what you're doing. And then I run this over, because remember, this is parallel and it goes to the vanishing point, and I run it over inside of it. So, so you kind of see the stapler part starting to run in. Now, in the photograph, it runs in about further down. That's fine. This runs in a little bit closer. You know, it is what it is. You're just using this as, again, a resource to draw a stapler in perspective. So now what I can do next is break this form down here. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to go up a little bit from the bottom, and I'm going to put a mark right here, and that's basically this base. If you can see it, it's hard to see because it's all black. I'm going to run it around. And it goes around the form, but I don't want to confuse you any more than that. I'm just going to keep it simple now. And this is the top of the base, and that's going to be in a little bit. So what I'm going to do there, and I kind of wish I had a different color pencil here. What I'm going to do there is take this corner, and I have to find the other corner, which is way right here. So because it's hard to find, so I'm going to put my pencil there, hold it down, run my ruler into the pencil, and then I'm just going to connect my corners, and I'm going to put my pencil on that line so I don't lose it. And again, I'm going to follow this line again to find the corner where it hits the back, and then I'm going to bring it over to the other side, which is right here. And it's easy to get lost in all this, super easy to get lost. And then here's the other corner here. So there's a point, that's the center point. That's not totally important, but these diagonal lines are important. So it's nice to put the center point because it helps you refine the diagonal lines. So what I'm gonna do is, similar as I kind of went in on the diagonal lines with those other parts of the design, I'm gonna go in a little bit here because as you see, the base is wider than that part. So I'm just gonna go in slightly. So here's a diagonal line. I think I'm gonna go in about this deep. It might be a little too deep. Maybe I'll go in this deep. So I'm gonna run that to the left vanishing point. I'm gonna make it a long line just so I know, and I'm gonna put a point on it just so I know what that is. Top of base. And then from there, I'm going to take the point that I made and run it to the back part. And it's slightly thinner than the base itself. And that's basically all that's happening here. After that, I can start putting my rounds in. What I didn't do was put the variation of this line in, but I think it's just getting too small and it's probably difficult to see in the video. But I kind of want to move on to the next part, which is rounding. So if you recall, in some of your other projects, to make a round is you just go in a corner and you round off the lines. a round does make a new line down, if that makes sense. Maybe not that deep in. And then there's also a round here. I'm gonna make rounds with darker values. A round as this goes back in space, which is right here. So there's gonna be a round right here, but you can't really see it. There's gonna be a round here. Round here. I believe there's a round in the very back part. There's a round here. There's a round here. And then after this, you can start to really outline the form itself with a darker value. Oh, remember we're changing the top here? I think I'm just gonna make it parallel, to be honest. I think it was parallel anyway, so I'm just gonna pull it up here, run this across. Run this across. So you can kind of see that little indentation there. And then the other thing I was going to do, I'm just going to put this little line in there. This is actually rounds itself too. And I think there's a little bit of an indentation right here where it goes down. And I'm just gonna make up, it looks like it's a little after that, so I'm just gonna make it up and say, yeah, it's right here. So basically it's just a line that goes down and then follows the same contour. It goes over. It's not going to the vanishing point because remember it's parallel to that new line. And then I'm just gonna make a small round. That's basically what happens. Now, this little guy here I can draw in, I believe it is, let's just say it's this little plate there. Just trying to use, I'll use this line here. I think that's kind of, I think I made a mistake around here. Looks a little weird. This little plate's also kind of a round. It's also raised off the bottom, so all you gotta do is just add another line to give it some thickness. And then you have this little smiley face thing on it, but you kind of get the idea of the stapler starting to clamp down. Now, if these vanishing points were further out, I probably have a little more room to work with. If this rectangle was a little bigger and I had a larger sheet of paper, I think I would show you all the little points and it'd be easier to draw. Until next time.